Hi guys, and welcome back to Almost a Cinephile. My name is Becca. If you are new here, we love to talk about all things movies and physical media related. If that sounds like your jam, you can give this video a thumbs up and subscribe below if you fancy. Today we are going to talk about things romance. Seeing as the V-Day is looming, we're going to talk about my top 10 favourite romances. My version of romance in terms of what I prefer to watch is kind of more away from the rom-coms, and I much prefer the kind of devastating, traumatic and slightly unhinged versions of romance. I love when romances kind of defy the genre. You are looking more into the character work and the relationship between the two, and a lot of these films don't actually have a happy ending. So if you're here for more rom-com style films, then this is probably not going to be for you. But if you love cinema that kind of flips genres on their heads or combines them with other genres, or is just a much more brutal version of the genre, then please carry on watching, because I've got 10 really good ones that I really want to talk about. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Bones and All. Bones and All is a story about Lee and Maren. Maren is played by Taylor Russell and Lee is played by Timothée Chalamet. They both have a bit of an affliction where they basically have a need or an urge to eat people. They're cannibals basically. So this film is a bit of a mashup between horror and romance. So there's gore, there's slurping noises, there's cannibalism in this, but there's also this really beautiful romance that blossoms between the two. It's a lot more of a coming of age story as well. Maren is kind of finding herself through this affliction that she has, whereas Lee has lived with it for a lot longer. He's a bit more streetwise and he's kind of moved around a lot and is used to what he is. Mark Rylance is also in this film, and he plays one of the most creepiest, scariest characters I've ever watched, Sully. This film, they do meet and run into quite a few really creepy people that have the same affliction, because they can smell each other. Basically, if one of them is a cannibalist and the other one is, they can smell between the two of them and pick up the scent of somebody that's exactly like them. So we follow Maren, who basically has moved around a lot as a child, because every time she gets settled, her nature comes out and bad things happen. So her dad basically loses it for the last time and leaves her on her own, and we're watching her on a road trip really to find herself and also find her mum, who is also like her. And when you find out what happens in that situation as well, also incredibly horrific. I think Chloe Sevigny plays her mum in this film, and it does an amazing job, even though she's only in it for a little bit. But we are also still following a romance between the two as they go on a road trip together, and it's really beautiful. The ending, I'm sorry, is devastating. It's not a happy ending, I'm really sorry. But the promise of what these two could be together, you see glimpses of that towards the end, before it goes completely sideways and breaks your heart completely. But I loved Bones and All. I actually loved it more for the romance side of it rather than the cannibal side. I felt like that was a really interesting story to add into it. But if that wasn't there, I still think it would be a really beautiful story. The next film that is absolutely devastating romance-wise is Call Me By Your Name. I've recommended this already a couple of times on this channel. I have the copy of this one. This stars, again, Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer playing Elio and Oliver. Oliver is an intern for Elio's dad, who's a professor, and he stays at their home, and Elio starts to become slightly fascinated and then a little bit obsessed with Oliver, and vice versa. The romance starts to kind of go both ways, and we follow the two characters as they discover this romance between themselves that they know is wrong, because in the era that this was supposed to be in, it isn't kind of deemed as normal to be gay at that point. And the ending just breaks your heart and crushes your soul, and I cried at the end of this. It is so devastating. There's also a monologue in this that is so heart-wrenchingly gut-breaking that it's one of my favourite monologues in all movie cinema history ever thus far. It's just gorgeous. This film smells and tastes like summer. If you want to save this until the weather starts getting a little bit better, I wouldn't blame you. I would definitely watch this in summertime because it just feels like a European getaway. It is gorgeous. It's set in Italy, and the food and the ambiance and the heat and the setting is just, it all creates this really romanticizing of their lives, and it's gorgeous. I would definitely give it a watch, but it is heartbreaking. Another film I have to put a bit of a disclaimer on, whilst it is a very, very unhinged romance, it's kind of more on the extreme version, and that is the 1997 version of Lolita. This stars Jeremy Irons and Dominique Swain. Dominique Swain plays Lolita and Jeremy Irons plays Humbert Humbert. And it's basically, I have to have a massive disclaimer here because it's basically paedophilia, but you follow Humbert Humbert through his point of view and how he feels so obsessed and devastatingly in love with Lolita. So he is a professor again, I believe, and he stays at this house where this woman is renting it out, and her daughter is Lolita. I believe the woman is single or she's separated, and Humbert Humbert basically gets into a relationship with her to get closer to Lolita. And then what happens after that is just chaos. Basically, I think the mum dies in the book and the film. I can't remember how she dies in the film anymore, whether she gets run over or drugged. I can't remember. But he's basically plots to try and take Lolita away from her and kidnaps her, essentially. And then it's a cross-country kind of road trip style film as he goes to his next place of work. We watch as their very difficult relationship unfolds. There is a nod here and there within the film that these two are in a sexual relationship, but you never see it on screen, and it's never obvious, but you can kind of tell they have had sexual relationships with one another. This is a really difficult watch because obviously we are talking about paedophilia, and we are also looking at it through the point of view of Humbert Humbert, which makes you almost try to sympathise with the character even though you know it's wrong. There's a lot of things on a lot of levels with this movie that are wrong, and I know a lot of people even queried and were quite angry as to why this film was even made in the first place, because it would have to mean that the female lead of Lolita would have to be a young girl, and how would that work in terms of not traumatizing her in real life. I have seen this film quite a few times. I watched it a lot when I was a lot younger, even though I'm not 100% sure if I watched it now I understood the themes back then. But I would just say this has got really heavy dark themes around it, but it is a very unhinged romance story. Another really sad and traumatic love story is the film Blue Valentine. This has got Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams. They play characters Dean and Cindy, and you're basically going back and forth from past and present as to when they started their relationship, when they were very, very young, and basically she gets pregnant very, very young before she goes to medical school and has to make a decision, and I believe she decides him and the baby, obviously. And then we're watching them also in present day and what's going wrong and why they're not really getting on as well, and it ends really, really heartbreakingly. I'm sorry, this is another one that's not a really good ending, particularly it's not a happy ending, but I love the way they delve deeply into romance and what that means. You're also following them from one era of their lives to the other in quick flashes, which ties the story up so beautifully. Ryan Gosling is an arse in this at the end, to be really honest. He's not a very lovable character. He's a little bit manipulative as well at the beginning, and he tries very, very hard to court Michelle Williams. I love this film. I love the music. I think Ryan Gosling sings in this as well, which is another like really beautiful moment between the two of them when they're young. But you really do realise that by the end this is so toxic that you know it's not right, even though you wished when they were younger that it would have turned out differently. Another very unhinged and really weird, wacky romance is Love Lies Bleeding. This was on my worst films of last year because I don't 100% know if I understood it. A lot of people were hyping it up as well, and it just didn't do much for me in terms of like hit me in the way that I thought it would. But in terms of a romance that's a little bit you know, a little bit creepy, a little bit weird. This definitely fits the genre of that. So we're following Kristen Stewart's character called Lou, who owns a gym, but she's also got a bit of an interesting and darker past with her family, particularly her dad. We're also following the character of Jackie, played by Katie M. O'Brien, who wants to get into a bodybuilding contest and go to Las Vegas to compete, and they form a very fast romance. I was gonna say friendship, but they form a very, very fast romance between the two of them, because Jackie goes to Lou's gym, and then Lou also introduces her to steroids, or an injectable, to an enhancing performance drug potentially, and Jackie kind of loses the plot after that a little bit. She becomes a lot more buff, and she also does things that lead to some really tricky situations. That also puts her and Lou at a bit of a tricky situation in terms of their relationship as well. It gets to be a bit difficult between the two of them because of it. I'm trying not to spoil this film, but in the end, despite all of it, they do come together and carry on coming together, despite everything. It's not really a relationship I would pine for particularly. I don't think either character is a very nice person. They're both very morally grey, and there's also the element of the dad in this as well, who has the most creepiest freaking hairstyle ever. But we're following them through, and they don't do very nice things, and they still stick it out together in the end, despite it all. If that sounds like your jam, then I would definitely give it a watch. To me, it didn't hit in every level, but it definitely is one of those more unhinged romance stories. So the next film I'm going to talk about is Blue is the Warmest Colour. This is another gay romance story between two women. We follow Adele. It's a much more coming of age story as she meets the blue-haired Emma, and they form like a bond, and then it quickly kind of collides into a relationship which completely spirals and gets way out of hand. And then again, the ending, not so brilliant. It's really sad, the ending, but I remember watching this and feeling totally beguiled by it. It was so beautiful. I love the cinematography in this movie, and I definitely need to rewatch it. As I said, I've only seen it like a couple of times a few years ago we're talking about now. I really want to own a copy of it as well and give it a rewatch, but this is a French film, and it just delves really deeply into female love and relationships, and what that looks like, and what that looks like as well when you're trying to find yourself, and they find themselves, and then they find themselves a bit too much, and then they realize that that's completely made life really difficult, and it all breaks apart. Definitely worth a watch because of that. It's definitely a really beautiful coming of age story with romance in it as well, that is the devastating part of this movie. So if you really love those kind of genres that have kind of blended together in this film, I would definitely recommend. Another really devastating and sad romance is Marriage Story. Again, I've only seen this one time, but it made such an impact on me. I felt like it was the first real true retelling of a story about what it's like to have love, and then what it's like to break it. These two characters, played by Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, want to break each other in the process of having a divorce. So we're following what they were like in the beginning, a little bit very similar to Blue Valentine, but then we're sped up to the present day, and we are watching as their divorce unfolds, and lawyers are involved, and they just want to hurt each other as hard as possible. There's also, I believe, a child or children involved in this as well, so we're also talking about custody, and that also gets really, really muddy and dirty, and the games that each other play with one another is just so toxic, and really sad to see that they go from one end of the spectrum in terms of their love for each other to the other, but you can still see the thread running all the way through. It's so beautiful, and it's such a unique and interesting way of telling the story of divorce, which many of us have to deal with in our own lives. It's not an uncommon thing that happens in life, so it's really nice to have a film that really shows the dark, muddy, dirty depths of what happens during that time, and how it affects each side, as a dad, as a mum, as a husband, as a wife, all of those things in this mess of a breakup, and you watch the whole thing just completely implode on itself. So a film that is a bit unhinged, but for many other different reasons. And I don't care that this is on my list, but 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah. This is unhinged, okay? The guy, sorry Christian Grey, you are toxic. You are very bizarre in this, and he makes Anna do some weird and freaky shit. However, it's still a romance. There, if you like this, the more spicier sexual end of romance, with a little bit of unhinged, and we are not talking about 365 days. That is not included in this. I'm not going there. I've not watched it. I don't want to. That is unhinged. But 50 Shades of Grey is a little bit more softer in terms of the sexual chemistry towards these two characters, between these two characters even. There's obviously some kinky stuff. There's obviously the red room of pain, or whatever she calls it in the book. I have read the books as well. I am not ashamed to put this on my list. It is romantic. It makes me giddy. There's some unhingedness to it. There's some toxicity in it as well. Obviously, these two people in real life need to go to therapy. But it's fun. It's fun. I don't care. It's on my list. Don't you judge me. We listen and we don't judge. A little bit of a dark horse, a little bit more of a film that's a bit underrated, in my opinion, that doesn't get spoken about too often, and that is Remember Me. This stars Robert Pattinson in his Twilight era days. I think he kind of fell out of Twilight and went straight into this straight afterwards. One of the first films he did after the franchise. He plays a character called Tyler, who is having a difficult time in life as it is. I think he has a very strained and toxic relationship with his dad. He has got a sister as well who he adores. So I believe his parents have split. And then we're also following the character Ali, who also has a really difficult family home life. So these two characters really do find each other through the commonality of having, you know, family that are really difficult to be around. The ending of this is devastating and shocking, and I was like, oh my god, I did not see that coming, and I really didn't. The ending I won't spoil, but you really don't see it coming. I'm really sorry, it's a sad ending again. But these two share a really beautiful and sweet romance. Again, there's potentially some toxicity between the two of these people purely because of their backgrounds and where they've come from, and the fact that they hold a lot of shit that they probably need to see a therapist about, but they do find love and romance between one another, and it's really amazing to watch. Pierce Brosnan is also in this as well. He plays Tyler's dad, and he's an arsehole in this, I'm not gonna lie. But I really love this. If you haven't watched this, I would totally give it a go. As I said, it's pretty much Robert Pattinson fell into this after Twilight, so you are getting an early era of Robert Pattinson if you like that kind of thing. But I just find this story was really, really gorgeous, as well as incredibly devastating at the end and traumatizing. And the last film that I feel like is a romance, but not a romance. It's one of my favourite films of all time. It's on my top 10 list at least. And that is Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation. This story is a bit more ambiguous with its romance in here. You don't really know whether Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson's characters are in a relationship that involves sexual chemistry, or is just a relationship built out of a really strong, unique understanding of one another. So you're following Scarlett Johansson's character, who is married to this photographer or film guy who is in Japan to do a movie or to be part of a movie set. You're also following Bill Murray's character, who is a actor who is promoting a whiskey over in Japan. They're staying at the same hotel, and they both suffer with quite high levels of loneliness as well as insomnia. They both are diagnosed as insomniacs, so they don't sleep very well either. And it's a very beautiful story about trying to understand yourself and find yourself, not only within the relationships you're already in, but as a person by yourself. Scarlett Johansson's character is gorgeous in this. I love her so much. She reminds me of me a lot. I find that I see myself in her, and the character, I mean. And I have had moments of feeling the way she feels in this movie. As I said, the relationship between the two of them is very ambiguous. The ending of this story is just absolutely stunning and heartbreaking and beautiful, but they are there for each other no matter what. They build up this relationship no matter what we kind of speculate towards what it is. You never find out. but it is just beautiful. They are so totally there for one another in that snapshot moment of time that they need each other as well. And I love it. I can't say enough good things. The score in this is so gorgeous. The music is gorgeous. The cinematography is gorgeous. And I love both of these characters in this movie. I actually hated this movie when I was younger. When my parents used to put it on, I didn't understand it. And I have come to really appreciate films that don't particularly have a huge plot, but are much more character focused, and this is one of them. So I hope you loved my top 10 unhinged, devastating and traumatic romance picks for Valentine's. Let me know in the comments what you guys will be watching. You may actually be out and about and have a much more better social life than I have. But let me know what your favourite picks are in terms of romance films, because I would love to have some recommendations. And that is everything for today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!